back to it here, Julie. Thank you for taking a minute out. And I would love to begin our conversation with 4 years ago, we were trying to wrap our heads around this pandemic. How long is it going to last? What are the residuals? And now in this kind of quote unquote post-pandemic era, how did you get through it and how did it change you?
Well, it was interesting. As a massage therapist, I was supposed to shut down. We were all required to shut down. And I did, like everybody else did. But I don't do massage. I do a form of muscular therapy that's very targeted. If you have a shoulder problem, for example, I'm only working on the muscles that have anything to do with your problem. And I don't use oil and you don't get undressed. And it's just very different. I call it muscular therapy.
Yeah.
So I had shut down and I have a client who's a medical doctor. So she called me up and she said, Julie, I can't put any weight on my hip. I have to come in. I said, well, I'm shut down. She said, Julie, you are not relaxing massage. You're an essential worker. Without you, I cannot put weight on my hip and I have to get to the hospital now. So I said, well, what do I do? She said, you wear a mask, they wear a mask, you wash your hands after each person, which you do anyway, and disinfect the cradle, which you do anyway. She said, and you'll be fine. So what happened was I never told anybody I was open, but I never told anybody I was shut. I just didn't say anything at all. And people would call me because I put out fires, like nobody comes here to relax. That is not what you do here. Right. And they would call up and say, oh, please tell me that you're open. Please tell me you're open. And I say, come on in. So business went down big time, probably 50%, because people just didn't call. But if they were in enough trouble that they couldn't move, they called. So it was different.
So let me ask you this. If I put you in front of a bunch of third grade students at career day right now, and one of the kids said, hey, what do you do for a living? How do you answer that child?
I help people who are having chronic pain or sports injuries, that people are having a problem moving or living their life or doing the things that they love to do. And I help them get back to it.
What did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream as a kid?
Truthfully, it's funny you should ask that. So Jonas Salk had come out with the polio vaccine. And so we were all lined up and brought down into the cafeteria and we all got our shots. And then we went upstairs and the nun was telling us about Dr. Salk and how he made the world a better place because he lived and blah, blah, blah. And I remember sitting there and saying, I want to make the world a better place because I lived. And I did that all my life. And I would do things like I'd be walking and I'd pick up some trash. And in my head, I'd say, I just made this spot a better place because I was here.
Yeah.
And I would help maybe a pregnant woman get her groceries into the car. And I'd think the same thing. And when I first was, I had no intention on ever being, well, my license says massage therapist, but I didn't even know that there was one. I mean, it wasn't part of my life, my upbringing. And what had happened was I was living in Hawaii at the time, which was pretty nice, by the way. Yeah. And we used to sail on Fridays. And the guy that was our bowman, which is a seriously stressful position during a race, because we used to race every Friday night. And he got off the boat one time and he literally collapsed in the grass in pain. And he was in serious pain. And people were passing by going, oh, Adam, I'm so sorry you're in pain. When you can come into the yacht club and I'll buy you a drink. And I thought, he'd bring the drink out now. He needs it now.
Yeah, right.
Right. So I knelt down by him and I said, what can I do to help you? And he said, just rub my back. So I knew as much about what goes on in the back as 99% of the world, which means I knew nothing. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm rubbing his back and I'd rub over a bump. And when I'd rub over the bump, he would like jump with pain. So I kept my finger on it for no other reason than because I didn't want to lose it, because I didn't know how I found it in the first place.
Yeah.
So I kept my finger on it. And while I was trying to figure out what am I supposed to do with this thing, it just melted, like having your finger on a little ice chip. And at that point, he would go, oh, like relief. So I thought, well, that's pretty cool. So then I would do it to another one, do it to another one. And eventually he went to sleep. So he comes in the yacht club and he goes, oh, Julie, thank you so much. That was great. I says, well, thank you. I get a dinner out of this. Remember, I'm from New York.
Yeah.
I was living in Hawaii, but I'm from New York.
Yeah.
And so he bought me dinner. So every Friday we'd get off the boat. He'd be on the grass. I would work on his back, and then he'd buy me dinner. And so finally I was being stationed back in New York. I worked for United Airlines at the time. And I was being sent back to New York. And I was talking to people about it. And somebody told me I should go look into a massage school when I got to New York. I thought that was the weirdest thing in the world. It's like, you think they have schools for massage? I mean, that was just like, I couldn't even imagine it.
Yeah.
Right? But of course, you have to learn somewhere.
Yeah.
But anyway, of course, in New York, if it exists in the world, it exists in New York.
Uh-huh.
And so I got back to New York, and sure enough, there was a Swedish Institute in Manhattan. And I went there, I told them what I was doing. And she said, well, you're not doing massage, but you do have to have a massage license in order to be able to touch people. And so that's how I ended up going to massage school.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So who's been a hero for you? Who's been an inspiration in your work?
In my work?
Yeah. And in your life, I think it's a Venn diagram that kind of bleeds into itself.
Yeah. So many people that are truly doing things for other people and not doing it because they're getting paid or they're getting accolades, but they're just doing things. It could be the Girl Scout leader. She's helping to make girls have a better understanding about themselves. So on a broad level, I would say anybody who's making the world a better place because they were there. And there's, what they say about if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
So on the news.
Yeah. Journalism.
So,
Yeah.
right. So we hear all this bad stuff about the United States or about the world and about people and you start to think that the world is just falling apart.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that's like 1%.
Mhm.
1%.
I agree.
And 99% are out there helping the old ladies to put their groceries in a car or raking somebody's lawn, like not even asking, just go out and rake an old person's lawn. There's millions and millions of people like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think kind of as a collective, that's my hero. It's the people who are doing things to make the world better.
It's funny you say that because that's the reason why I love podcasting. I think it's a modern
Yeah.
version of therapy. I think I have figured out that we're all so much more alike. The media does lead with the whole
Yeah.
idea of the divisiveness and how gung ho. I don't feel like those things are happening around me. And I see people doing great things all the time on so many
Yeah.
levels. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I hear people talking about how rich people are out there and they're trying to get more money from you. And are there some? Yes, of course there are. But then you look at somebody, and I guess it's okay for me to use names, like a Jack Canfield.
Yeah.
He's out there he's rich. And because he's rich, he can do so much good for
Yeah.
so many. Tony Robbins, look at
Yeah.
him. He feeds millions of people,
Yeah.
millions of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Because a good thing was done to him when he was 12.
Yep.
So it has nothing to do with whether you have money, whether you don't have money. It has to do with, are you a good person?
Yeah, I totally agree. So speaking of all of those kind of high profile people and just people in
Mhm.
general, if you can meet one person on the planet right now that you find fascinating, who would it be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
Probably Jack Canfield.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would, because I I think now who knows what he's doing in his personal life, but I think he walks his talk.
Yeah.
Tony Robbins, I think he walks his talk. I'd love to meet him.
So I gotta know right now, as a transplant from New York, what do you miss the most about New York, and what do you like the best about Florida?
Do we have an hour or two for me to tell you?
We got our whole lives.
Oh, there's so much I miss about New York.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, my entire family's up there. So I've got 6 grandchildren
Wow.
and 2 children, and they're all up in New York. Um, so I miss them a lot. And um, I love the fact, like when you're in Manhattan, if you're hungry at 2 in the morning, you can go out and find something to eat.
Right.
There is some place open
Yeah.
where you can get something to eat.
Yeah.
And and yet my son lives upstate New York, which is so beautiful. It vies for Vermont or Maine or any of those beautiful places with the mountains and the trees. And I mean, New York has so much to offer.
Yeah. So
I always feel that anybody who says they don't like New York hasn't been there.
there's something wrong with them too. I mean, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just there's something about them that doesn't feel adventure. And I'm not even saying that in a nefarious way. It's just weird because I remember, I went up there a few times because my family lived in Long Island. They lived up in Massapequa. And I remember my cousin took me down to the city in the mid 90s when the towers were still up. And I stood between them. And I remember when all that happened, I was actually in the back of a water taxi in Venice, Italy, when that happened. I was like, there's no way. Those towers are massive. But I remember taking that tour, and I always felt it was weird because she was a real hipster and she was like ducking on the top of the double-decker bus. Like, I hope no one sees me and all of this. But I'm going through and like seeing everything in New York, and it's fascinating. I mean, the
Yeah.
amount of people, the amount of activity, just like you said, there's a diner open at any time of the night. Um, and then you contrast that with Florida, which the rest of the world kind of looks at Florida, and it's a punchline, but this is the funniest thing that I ever heard. One time, my wife and I were at a local bar here, and somebody said, just to compound the idea of how kind of feral Florida can be, type the word Florida and just the day that you were born, and just see what headline comes up. And it's kind of a thing that people do. It's crazy the amount of stuff that comes up.
I'm
Just
gonna have to do that.
do it. It's crazy. The headlines that come up, it's like, oh my God, like just you're like, there's no way that happened, but it's an actual headline from the
Right.
newspaper. So anyway,
Right.
yeah, you should give it a shot.
So it's nice down here. And there's a lot to like about here in Sarasota,
Yeah,
and in Florida, but in Sarasota. Um, my emotion is still up in New York.
yeah,
That's life. That's the way it's going to be. But I mean, the weather is great. Even now, it's summertime, and so it's hot. Although I don't remember it ever being over 100.
yeah,
Maybe it has at some point, but it's usually in the 90s. What gets you is the humidity.
yeah,
Oh my gosh, it's like walking into a brick wall.
yeah,
But in the winter time, it's awesome.
yeah, yeah. I have no doubt. And I'm, being from Kansas City, and New York has kind of the same
Yeah,
temporal seasonal things. You just get to the point where the cold's like, man, I've had it.
right. I can't do this anymore. I
Yeah.
just cannot. People will say to me, well, it's just too hot in Florida. I said, well, let's put it this way. When you're up north, you have a heated house, a heated car, and it's heated wherever you're going to. When you're down south, it's have air conditioned house, air conditioned car, and air conditioned wherever you're going to. The difference is when you're up north, when you're going from the house to the car, you have to put on a coat, hat, gloves, long
Yep.
pants, boots, go through the snow, get the snow off your car, get in the car, turn on the heat. Now you're sweating because you have too many clothes on. Then you get back out. Now you're freezing because you were sweating in the car. Down south, you go from the house to the car, you put on your flip flops, and off you go.
Yeah. You're good. I love it.
So,
I
yeah,
absolutely love it. That's my kind of attire. So let me ask you this: as somebody that's internationally recognized, very esteemed in your field,
thank
what
you.
gets you up every day? What makes you do this work consistently every day for as long as you've done it?
Well, I've been doing it now for 35 years, which is a really long time.
Yeah.
And what gets me is truly, Joe, every day I'll have somebody who will come, and I only work with chronic pain and sports injuries. So nobody's coming here because they want to relax.
Right.
They're coming here because they can't lift their arm up, or they can't turn their head, or whatever the case may be. And I work on them, and it's like it's a miracle or something. I don't know. It works. But what's more important than me knowing how to do it for you is that because I had this 2-year nightmare where I kept, first I had frozen shoulder, my left arm. I couldn't move my left elbow more than 2 inches away from my waist. And I mean, it just would not move. And if I tried to move it, it was like somebody was taking a hot pickaxe and just stabbing me in the shoulder. And I went everywhere, I went to everybody who should have been able to help me and couldn't. And what happened was I kind of had this little conversation. I say I was talking to the ceiling, and I go, "Are you paying attention? Do you see what's happening to me?" And, you don't want to offend anybody. So I'm talking to the ceiling.
Sure.
And the ceiling said to me, "Well, fix yourself." And I said, "And exactly how am I supposed to do that?" And the ceiling said, "Figure it out."
Right.
So I did. And it was this 2-year period where first it was my shoulder. That took a couple of months. That took from October until February. So 4 months. But I got it back 100%. The next thing after that was all better and everything was fine. Don't I wake up with a stiff neck and I'm like this and I can't pick my head up. So I didn't even bother trying to go to anybody else. I just figured out what to do. And it was one thing after another. It took 2 years. And toward the end of that 2 years, I was thinking about, wow, I really really learned the body. And then I go, the only thing I want to do, I want to study the hand and wrist a little bit more. And then I went, I don't need it. I can figure it out on someone else. Thank you. So I got carpal tunnel and I figured out the hand and the wrist.
Wow. I mean, that's kind of the cornerstone of any entrepreneur. I've always heard the best advice, the best, because I don't necessarily think, I mean, there's parts of me that think like that. I'm more of a creative, but they always say that the really good entrepreneurs solve a problem.
Right.
That's the
Right.
whole thing,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
it's true. And the thing is, if I hadn't had all those situations, now I knew beforehand, I knew how to work with you. If you had come in with any of those circumstances, I could have worked with you and I knew how to do it. But because of it happening to me, I had to figure out how to self-treat. Well, if I figured out how to do it to me, I can teach you.
Yeah.
So now you come in and you have a shoulder problem. And I figure out which muscles it is and I work on those muscles. And at the end of the session, I always teach people 2 or 3 self-treatments that you can do so that you continue your therapy at home.
Yeah.
Because it is going to, if it's chronic pain, it is going to return. It is. I mean, it's chronic pain. It's going to come back.
Yeah.
But if I show you how to do it, then you can do it. Well, that, of course, worked its way into writing books because I always had this fear of having all of this knowledge in my head and then me making my transition and that's it. It's gone.
Yeah.
So I didn't want that to be the case. So I've written a bunch of books. I have Treat Yourself to Pain-Free Living, The Pain-Free Athlete, which was originally The Pain-Free Triathlete because I used to work with Ironman triathletes, carpal tunnel syndrome treatment. It's all there. I mean, I've written everything so that if I do decide to leave this earth, well, my information is still here.
Absolutely. You're leaving it behind. So of all of these things that you've done with your life and evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
That
Yeah.
learning how to teach you how to self-treat. Because if I hadn't learned how to do it, like me do it on you, I had to learn how to do that in order to be able to do the self-treatments.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you're the one that's driving this bus here. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients. but you're in control. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, it's funny, there's a thing that's called imposter syndrome.
Uh-huh.
And I've heard lots of people who are good at what they do suffer from imposter syndrome because it comes so naturally. Like for a long time, I didn't teach other people because it was just so logical and so easy. I figured they just knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when I did start teaching people, it makes you almost feel like an imposter. It's like, this is so simple.
Yeah.
Yet I'm getting paid to teach you something that is so logical and so easy. And so I think that's, I'm really thrilled with what I do. I really am. And that's why I keep doing it after all these years.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to get your books, they want to hire you, reach out, learn more about all the wonderful work you do, where's the best place to go?
Flexibleathlete.com.
Okay.
There's two actually, either flexibleathlete.com or Julstro Method.com. It's JULS like sugar, T like Tom, RO method.com. Those two, you can learn pretty much everything about me.
This has been delightful. Julie, I'm so glad I ran into you. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Joe.
And please send my love to Sarasota.
I'll do that.
Thank you.
You have
Take
a
care.
great day.
You
Thank
too.
you.